Welcome to another episode of the Data Driven Carcast, episode 124, Data Mesh versus Data Fabric. What a mess. That is the question of the week. It might be the question of the month. Who knows? It might be the question of 2022. So in today's update, we're going to focus on that distinction, starting with a great article from my friend, Andrew Brust. I have known Andrew for many years. He's a very knowledgeable data leader. And if you don't know him already, this is someone you're going to want to follow. Also, I'm going to share a great piece from Eric Broda on data mesh architecture patterns. This year, you're going to hear a lot about this concept of the data mesh, and I want to make sure that I share with you resources that move past the semantic argument on what is what, so we can focus on how to effectively implement a data mesh. This piece from Eric is a great start, just like the two-part series blog that I shared last week, if you remember, from François Nguyen, who's the CIO at L'Oreal, very experienced leader as well. Also, before I forget, this coming Friday, January 28th, Bernard Moore and I will be doing our usual monthly update. So make sure to mark your calendars. We will be covering the data mesh concept, of course, and I want to hear your thoughts, your questions. So continue to direct message me and ping me on post if you'd like. And if you missed that session, on the Monday after that, on the 31st, I will be on Joe and Matt's Monday morning data chat to further discuss the topic we talked about last week. They had Zamak talk about the concept, so I'm following that to talk about implementations and what we're hearing from customers on the topic of the data mesh, and the data fabric. And before we get started on that, I want to give a shout out to a few great data leaders that I've had the opportunity to talk about this week and feature throughout the week. The first one is my friend Jack, the VP of Data from Reddit. He's currently hiring for a Director of Data Platforms. This is your chance to work with someone who is very experienced at one of the hottest, most innovative companies in the space right now. So the postings to the job is on my blog. Ping him directly. I'm sure he'll appreciate that. Second, Philip and Tim from Wayfair. We've talked about Wayfair in the past and the amazing work that they've done with data. If you remember, Wayfair has 3,000 engineers and data scientists out of 16,000 employees. That almost 20% of their employees are data employees. So for all intent and purposes, you can say that Wayfair is not just a retail company, it's also a data company. And this week, they are sharing how they migrated their on-prem infrastructure to the cloud. This is massive infrastructure. They have a catalog of 22 million items, tens of millions of customers. They work with 16,000 suppliers. You're going to want to read this to understand how to do this type of migration at large scale. And then finally, James from Feeding America. This is an amazing company with a fantastic mission. They're really using data to do good. Every $1 they collect can provide 10 meals. And in this interview, we learned from James how they're dealing with building a data mesh in action. He talks about speed, cost, scale. James and his team have done an amazing work to build the secure data mesh. If you realize, Feeding America is a network, and so it's highly distributed. Their impact is local. So distribution of organizations, distribution of data, and they've done a fantastic work. This is a great case study of data mesh at work. And so the video of this data journey, the best practice and worst practices are going to be really helpful for you to understand the how of the data mesh. So make sure to go on the blog and connect with James, fantastic human being, an amazing company. In fact, this topic of data mesh at work brings us to the topic of the week. This article that we've been talking about from Andrew, and there's a lot of activity around it. What is this data fabric and data mesh business? Why is everyone arguing about it? Well, if you remember, earlier last year in November, I issued a LinkedIn survey asking you what you thought the differences between the data mesh and data fabric were. And Tony Bayer had written a piece on that, which inspired me to create this survey. The bottom line of the survey is that 52% of you think the two concepts are quite different. Many of you chimed in, from Cindy to Matt to Miles to Mark Bayer from Gartner, who originally wrote a paper on data fabric. I see Scott being involved as well there. So there's a lot of emotion around it, and certainly a lot of argument. The consensus was that, of course, data fabric is a technology concept, and the data mesh is an organizational blueprint. And so, that's really kind of what you'll see in this article from Andrew Brust this week. And I think it takes the concept even further, and that's what I really like, is, of course, he's got this table of comparing data mesh and data fabric, but if you read the piece, I think you'll find something much more critical. There's at least 2 points I want to make sure you see in this article. The first one is this idea that distributed data is not a flaw. It's not an imperfection. It didn't happen by accident. In Andrew's words, he says the dispersal of operational data is a natural state. The overall operational data corpus is supposed to be scattered. It got that way through optimization, not incompetence. I think that's an important point. Your organization, your people are distributed. Heck, the data from your partners, they own that you want to maybe work with, is vastly distributed. It's actually not even within your control. So this distribution is expected, and it's really wrong to say that centralization of all the data, this all concept we have of the enterprise data warehouse, having all the data into one place, is really counter-natural to the reality of our world and reality of your organization. So what does that mean for the data mesh? It means that the data mesh is most likely not going to be the first stage of your maturity. You can't just jump into data mesh. What you need to do before is take the inventory of your data, understand where it lays, catalog it as holistically as you can, because it's never going to be at all in one place. As Andrew says in his piece, the data mesh is premised on the fact that the data is available, discoverable, cleansed, consolidated. There's this 6 concept of the data domain. And, you got to ask yourself, is that the case at your company already? If that's the case, then you're ready for the data mesh. But if it's not, like many organizations, the data mesh cannot be your first step. Step 1 is something else. Now, you've heard me talk about the concept of the data ocean in the past. This is not something I've invented. This is something I've learned from listening to people like you. And one such leader is Vodafone's head of analytics and data services, Simon Harris. I'm going to put his video down in comment. And he coined this term of the data ocean a few years ago. And I like this term because, we think about landlocked data lakes. A data lake is something where it's very comfortable to see the end of it. But the reality of your data is that you don't see the end of it, just like an ocean. So this idea of the ocean, I think, is a better representation and kind of presupposes a much broader view of your data. The second point that Andrew makes in his piece is that while organization digitalization projects have accelerated through the pandemic, now the focus is got to be around returning value. And my friend Bill Schmartz is going to love this. The quote from Andrew's piece is, organizations must move from investment to return. What is the consequence of that? What does this mean for the data mesh? Is that the data mesh cannot be the architecture endpoint for your organization. It is not the first step, and it's not the end goal either. It is a step towards getting to the end goal for you. What is that? It is creating data products. We know that value comes from data that comes from usage and the application of the data. Here, I'm not talking about simple dashboards. I'm talking about intelligent, rich data applications that trigger actions. Think about fraud prediction, anomaly detection, recommendation models for real-time offers. And so that's a critical concept, I think, to understand, is the data mesh is not the beginning. It's not the end goal. It is a step to get you to creating data products. So think about the data ocean as the fundamental block for the data mesh, and the data mesh as the foundation for getting to data products. Now, luckily, there's a lot of literature on that. Like I said, I highlighted Francois's piece, which I think is probably one of the best pieces to figure out how to build a data mesh in real life. And as I said, as I started here, James' piece from Feeding America, which is a great example of data mesh at work. Anyway, this one was a little bit longer, but I thought those were important concepts, and I see many of you engaging with Andrew Bress's piece, so I know this is close to many of you. I hope this was helpful. Connect with me on Friday and on Monday. Send me your questions, tag me. I hope you have a great week. I will see you next week.